Even after 2+ years, I still wouldn't consider myself an expert in videography or photography. Nowhere near it, because I'm still learning on the daily. But there are 5 things which I consider the basics of videography and photography that I believe I do have a good handle on. So it's those 5 things that I am gonna impart to you today. I mean, don't get me wrong, for the first year of filming, for the first year of filming and creating any videos, I was an auto boy. That little A, the green A on top of your dial of your camera that you flick it to, that's what I would do. Flick it to A and then leave it on. And then every photo and video I created was in auto mode, which is why my videos look pants. I would often look at other videos and think, why can't I get my video to look like that? I'm using the same kind of gear. What am I doing wrong? And it was auto mode. So these 5 settings are going to talk you through how to cleanse yourself of auto mode, how to get out of auto into manual with these 5 settings. So enough about banging on about the 5 settings. What are the 5 settings? Now the shelf's up, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, white balance and exposure. 5 things that now this is up and done, I can sit properly and talk to you about. Well, almost. My card collection has been hidden for a while. This is just a very small part of said collection. A few LEDs, because everything's looked better with LEDs, and then job done. So yeah, let's do it. 5 things. Let's go. Whenever it comes to anything slightly technical, I always tell people to go back to the basics. What I'm going to talk about now is more tailored towards video, but the information is, or how it can be used, also applies to photography. As I said, these are the basics, and whilst they seem obvious and simple to me now, that wasn't always the case. I'm not proud to admit this, I was an auto-only boy. I would whack my camera over to that little green A for auto setting and hit record, and away I went. But little did I know, with learning these 5 basic areas, I could drastically increase the quality of my videos and photos forever. Now I have a better understanding of what I'm doing. I never use auto mode anymore. I am a manual man all the way, which has allowed me to get some great shots and take control of every single aspect of my videos. So I'm going to explain what I think are the main settings in manual mode, and also give you some examples to try and give context and help you understand the effect that changing said settings actually has on your image. Because even though I watched a lot of YouTube videos, I just still didn't get it. I went out and started practicing these and putting them into practice, and it's only then did I understand them, grasp them, and begin to implement them. Here's a quick little history lesson for you. Video is made up of a lot of single images, all put in order and viewed fast. So here in the UK, I shoot at 25 frames per second, which is referred to as the FPS, which means there are 25 photos every 1 second of video. 25 FPS, or 23.98 to my non-UK viewers, is said to be the correct frame rate for a more natural looking video with the right amount of motion blur, which means the detail you can see in fast moving action, such as this. My hand, if you paused it, would be blurred. And it's this frame rate that matches closely to what our real eyes see, and thus is referred to as the more cinematic frame rate. When I first started making videos in auto mode, the camera would decide what frame rate it wanted to use, or I would, thinking higher is better, film in something stupid like 200 frames per second, and then wonder why the videos looked really odd and hyper real, like too realistic. It took me ages to understand it was the frame rate that affected this. I still do use a high frame rate now, 100 frames per second, and that allows me to get that lovely buttery smooth slow motion which all of us YouTubers seem to like so much. It is worth noting the FPS will directly affect how light or dark your image is. The higher the FPS, the quicker the shutter, meaning there is less time for light to get into your sensor, meaning darker shots. The lower the FPS, the longer the shutter between opening and closing, the brighter the shots. In manual mode, the frame rate can be used to let more or less light in if you don't have something like an ND filter, which, as we know, is sunglasses for the camera. So it's a useful way to control the light yourself. The aperture, or as it's also known by the f-stop, is the term used to describe how fast or how open your lens can be. Confusing, I know, but bear with me. Look at it this way. When the lens is said to be a fast lens, it means the aperture, or this little shield inside the lens, can open right out really wide. All you need to understand is the lower the f-stop number, the more light you can let into your camera, which means the lens is faster and great in low light conditions. But it also means you can get a real nice blurry background behind your subject, often referred to as the bokeh. When your subject is in focus, but everything in front or behind them is blurry, it can lead to a more cinematic or pleasing image, shall we say. When in manual mode, the aperture can also be used to control the amount of light you let into the camera once again, as well as how much is in focus. Wider open, faster or lower f-stop number means more light and less in focus. How closed, slow or higher the f-stop number means less light, more in focus, and generally a sharper image. I really hope I got that right, because I'll get slaughtered in the comments if I didn't. This one confused me for a very long time, so I used a cheat sheet, which I still have and still use today. So perhaps maybe just look at this, rather than watching a video of me talking about it. I'm joking. Please watch. Video friend. The ISO number, or the International Organization for Standardization number, is the thing used to control the camera's sensitivity to light. Notice how much I keep mentioning light? That is an extremely important part of videography and photography and will drastically affect the final image or video that you're trying to produce. So you should be giving careful consideration to this field at all times. Lighting is just a thing of its own. In fact, I think I've done a video about it. The lower the ISO, the more sensitive to light your camera will be, meaning the image may be darker if you don't have a lot of light, but it will also contain less noise. The higher the ISO, the brighter the image, but the higher you go, the more noise you introduce, adversely affecting the quality of your video. I always try and keep my ISO as low as possible to avoid any grainy images that look pants, and it's really, really hard to work with these in the editing phase. It does mean I need to introduce a lot of external extra light in my videos, but it's worth it for a nice, clean, crispy looking video. In manual mode, I generally will use the ISO when I'm out and about in the sun to keep the image as dark as possible, or I'll bump up the ISO at night to be able to see more in the shadows, but I do so again as little as possible to reduce the effect on picture quality. The white balance is how the camera sees the color white through to black. You want your camera to see as pure a black and as pure a white as possible. So all your colors in between these are as close to true life as possible. And here we go again, banging on about different types of light. Different types of light, such as LED light, home light bulbs, lamps, the sun, etc., all produce different temperatures of light, which will affect how the camera sees the various different colors. Light temperature is measured in something called kelvins, and that's
all I have to say about that.
Manually setting the camera's white balance and telling it what kind of light you are using will give the camera the best possible chance of guessing the correct colors, and will more importantly prevent your camera automatically changing what it thinks is the correct white balance halfway through a video, because it thinks you've gone from a brightly lit sunlit room to a dull lit LED room, for example. Thus, it reduces your chance of your image going slightly to the blue or slightly to the orange tinted scale. Even to this day, manually setting the white balance is something I forget and still wonder why my videos are changing colour halfway through. I do it on the daily. I have to record at least one extra time every single time because I forget to set the white balance. Trying to fix this in post, back in the editing suite, also known as the study, is an absolute nightmare. So get it right first time in camera. As with all of these settings, do it right first time in camera and you'll save yourself a massive headache. Exposure, exposure, exposure. Confusingly, or not if you're more switched on than I was, there isn't a single setting you can just flick to control exposure. I spent ages trying to understand this and wondering why my camera didn't have a little exposure button, which now actually seems quite silly to me.
No, you're a wally, you are.
You set and manage your exposure by using a mix of all the other settings I've just been talking about, along with various environmental settings such as lighting and positioning of the camera. At its simplest form, exposure is how bright or how dark your image is, how much detail the camera can see in the highlights, which are all the colours closer to white, and how much detail it can see in the shadows, which are all the colours closer to black. There is no right or wrong answer or setting when it comes to exposure, as it will all depend on the look you are trying to achieve in your video, along with the conditions you're shooting in. It's also very important, however, to try and get the right exposure in camera as much as possible. As I just mentioned, fixing this in post can be an absolute nightmare and can quickly kill the quality of your video. Dead. Bang, stopped it right there. Get your exposure wrong, you can't fix it in post. It's an absolute nightmare. If you expose too high, meaning there is too much light, then your highlights will be blown out, meaning there will be no chance of discovering any details in them whatsoever. For example, a sky captured with the correct exposure would look like this, where you can see the colour and the clouds, but an overexposed image looks like this, which is pure white with no details whatsoever. And this term is known as blowing out your highlights. If your exposure is too low, you end up with a much darker image like this. Bring up the exposure on a darker image in post to try and recover some of the detail in the shadows is much easier than recovering the highlights when editing, especially when using the Sony A7 III like I do, which has excellent low light capability. But as I said, it's important to try and get a good balance. But the rule of thumb when it comes to exposure is to protect your highlights. Wow. That's one of the rules that I follow anyway. Sometimes it's not possible to expose correctly for everything in the frame. Technology is getting much better and now you can record HDR video, which helps with this. HDR basically takes an overexposed image, a normally exposed image, and an underexposed image, and then blends them all together to give you kind of like a perfect image. In video, this isn't always possible, so the rule of thumb to go along with the other one is always expose for your subject with your highlights in mind. So there you go, 5 basic things for video or photo, which hopefully I've explained as simple as possible, whilst offering some examples for context. If I haven't explained them particularly well, I don't really care. No, I'm just joking. If I haven't explained them particularly well, there's loads and loads of information online. But also, drop me a comment below and I'll try to help out as best I can. But also, you know what's coming. Let me know in the comments box below any other comments, questions or feedback about this video or any other videos or anything else I do, and I will come back to you because that's the community, that's what we do. It also helps with things like YouTube engagement rate. So until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not already. Hit that bell for notifications of when I upload new videos, and until next time, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, internet.
Throw this shade on me, like they all hate on me. Don't bring that rage on me. Why they throwing shade on me, like they be ashamed of me. I thought, what age are we? Oh,